it's like a memory. Why sometimes you remember one thing that's from your childhood and you don't remember anything else? And if you remember that one thing must have had significance in your life. You just didn't know until you realized later. I guess that's it. Does this answer your question? Sorry, it's not satisfied. Well, I'm not really a theoretician. I can only rationalize as much. Otherwise, I can't read the fiction, I guess.
That's interesting.
And there is an autobiographical element, say, in The Feathers, which is a very, I should say that story involves the death of a young woman. Is that?
That's my big sister, yeah. That story is based on my big sister's death. Oh, and now
during the Cultural Revolution.
Right, during she was 16 years old when she died. She was a Red Guard.
I suppose that's a good link into the old adage about writing, write what you know, which everyone here will be familiar with. I was wondering how helpful you all found that adage, or otherwise. Rana, I think perhaps you might begin on that, because you write what you know the least of anyone here.
Yeah, I mean, I have, I suppose, conspicuously not written what I know, and in fact, I haven't even been to some of the places. I haven't been to Lagos, for instance, which I read about here. I think that every writer is, of course, at some level writing about what they know, because they write about things that are meaningful to them. But for me, and this is a personal response, I think that writing is essentially a process of the imagination. I think facts are usually relatively easy to come by these days about places or people or moments in time. One can do research. There are ways of coming across facts. But essentially, writing is a work of the imagination. And I think of a quote that I really like from Saul Bellow, who in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech in 1976 said something like, he said, the mystery of mankind increases even as forms of literature wear out. It is only symbolism or realism or sensibility wearing out, and not the mystery of mankind. And I think this is, to me, the kind of faith of the novelist, that even as life seems to get kind of bleak, this is a failure of the imagination, not of reality. And the novelist's job is to reinvigorate that imagination and find new ways to imagine what human life can be about. So my emphasis in my writing is not on my reproduction of reality in some kind of way, but on the idea of, on the imagination, and in a way of kind of, in a more mystical sense of channeling what is otherworldly and rendering it. So I find the knowledge part sort of a basic part. I think you can go out and find out about, you know, lots of periods in time and things. But what the novelist brings to the world is not fact, but a vision, I suppose.
And then, I suppose, you probably fall somewhere in between, because you've imagined into life a 14-year-old Colombian hitman, and at the same time you do draw quite heavily on your own self, or do you? We wonder. I should say the first story in Nam's collection involves a young writer who happens to be named Nam, happens to be studying at Iowa, probably looking for a best-selling collection of short stories. But that's just incidental. This is fiction.
Of course, short stories. No, I remember I was doing an interview with the Times in England, and asked me a bunch of questions about, you know, the sort of normal, usual suspect questions. And then one of the questions was, what was the most challenging or difficult character? And I was thinking about it, and for various reasons, I said, well, actually, writing the character who had my name and some of my circumstances was very difficult, because if you've read the rest of the book, you'll sort of realise that I'm pretty allergic to overly self-conscious writing. And so I said, you know, well, I think the character named Nam, and of course what they did was they splashed it with that horribly wanky photo, and the title of the article was, "I am my most challenging character." And I've never received the end of that for that. But I really like that headline. I know. It's the one thing which you could possibly tweak, and of course they found it. But I really like what Rana was saying, and the way that I think about writing what you know, I guess is, for me, the very statement presumes that we know what we think we know. And I think if there's one thing that I can be certain of, it's that that my knowledge of things, my memory of things, my account of things is so arbitrary and contingent and unreliable, and my understanding of things is always premised on other things which I think I understand. Of course I don't. And that's just looking within myself. I mean, how could I possibly cast myself into the heads and consciousnesses and motivations of, you know, of the person next to me or you or anyone else? So in one sense, it feels like a very self-defeating thing to close off that set. And so I really like what you say about being open to the mystery of everything, you know, of place, of time, of history, of circumstance, of memory, of character. And for me personally, you know, when a character, for example, is completely known, you know, whether it's by the author or the reader or even by another character, that's when that character dies for me. It's just a dead character. It's a fat character that's a purposive sort of tool, but it's not really doing anything that is, you know, tapping into the imagination. And I feel the same way about, you know, about a sense of place, for example. I mean, we all have such different subjectivities, and if I were to ask you guys to describe this room right now, you know, we'd come up with so many different accounts of how you remembered it, what was important, what was necessary, what was sufficient in the details of the accounting. So everything is just mediated, filtered, and so unreliable. And so for me, to write what I know is almost a continual coming to terms with what I don't know, and it's just groping, you know, in the dark.
May I add a comment?
Please.
I may be a little bit offensive with you guys, okay? Just joke. I wonder, you guys rely on imagination so much, it's because you don't have interesting experience. I'm saying this, I mean, of course, your case in my life is like this. Like, my daughter is a teenager, and she doesn't read any realism, fiction, non-fiction, whatever. She likes to write and read only fantasy and maybe a little bit, let's just say, science fiction or that kind of thing. I was asking her, she never read my stories, by the way, my daughter. And I asked her why, and she said, reality is boring. So she only wants to write, you know, with her imagination, because her imagined story world is more interesting. Would that make a little bit sense to you guys?
I mean, I think there's a lot of sense in that, but I think the opposite also pertains. I mean, there are novelists nowadays who say, Philip Roth, for example, said that that modern reality just absolutely outstrips in its dynamism, its character, its outlandishness, anything that any fiction writer could imagine. And there's so much that's crazy out there. You know, think about Bertie Madoff, for example. if you tried to write that character, you'd be, you know, laughed out of the room for trying to rip off like a Tom Wolfe derivative caricature. But here it is, and here's that thing, and it happened. If you look at the politics of the day, if you look at the mass culture, the pop media out there, it's just absolutely outstripping hysterically anything that we could actually come up with. And so it's almost as though reality isn't really reality, and that our speaking for myself anyway, my conceptual reality is so extraordinary.